thing that scares me the most about this transgender revolution, or whatever you want to call it, or woke mind virus, or this transgender craze, is that the people who are raising children who are transgender themselves are raising kids to be transgender.
That's what they used to say about gay and lesbian parents. It wasn't true then, and it's not true now. That's Josh from the YouTube channel Dad Challenge Podcast. He's placing the same perceptions that some straight and cisgender parents place rigidly on their own kids. They assume and expect their child, who, for example, appears to be a boy, to act in a manner that Western society deems as male. Dads are excited to take their son in the backyard to throw the football around, or buy them a beginner rifle and teach them to hunt, be rough and tumble and like dinosaurs, and eventually girls. Boys should dress in jeans and t-shirts and dark colors, especially blue. Here in Texas, boys should wear boots or sneakers under the strict masculine rules some have in the South. If your genetic at birth shows you to be a girl, a lot of parents expect their child to wear pink bows and frilly dresses and paint their nails and wear heels. Girls should shriek when seeing a snake, where boys should just want to pummel the poor animal with a baseball bat. That's what some of the typical straight, right-wing, fundy parent insists their children or grandchildren to be. Therefore, transgendered parents must assume and insist their kids be just like them, right? Wrong. So very freaking wrong. In my experience, and I've counseled quite a number of them, transgender parents tend to be more aware that gender norms do not fit all sizes and allow their children to explore who they are more than what their gender says they should be. Transgender parents whom I've worked with don't insist their boys play with dolls, but they do have dolls available to the boys as well as the girls. Transgender parents allow their children to explore and play with toys of all types, not just the ones that their gender assigned at birth are supposed to play with. But let's not just take my anecdotal, although professional, word for that. Studies on the outcomes for children with transgender parents have found no evidence that having a transgender parent affects a child's gender identity or sexual orientation development, nor has an impact on other developmental milestones. According to the UCLA School of Law, Williams Institute, a review of existing research of transgender parenting revealed some fascinating information. They reviewed 51 existing reports studying transgender parents, their relationships with their children, the outcomes for children with a transgender parent, among some other things. So what did they find? There is no evidence that children of transgender parents are different from other children in any developmental milestones. So, if children of cisgender parents stopped needing their binkies at an average age of 18 months, so too did the kids of transgender parents drop their pacifiers in search of other things to panic their parents. Like sticking their little fingers into the light sockets just to see what happens. Use light socket covers if you have little ones, for all our sakes, because parenting is terrifying and wonderful and terrifyingly wonderful. Studies on the outcomes for children with transgender parents have found no evidence that having a transgender parent affects a child's gender identity or sexual orientation development. Transgender kids of cisgender parents are still going to be transgender and most likely told to go take that nail polish off if they are seen as a boy, or stop being so bitchy like they are some kind of strong man or something if they are seen as a girl. Fun side fact. When I interviewed for an FFA scholarship in 1987, I was turned down for the full ride scholarship because I came on too strong for a girl. Exact words from the panel. A male got the main scholarship that year. I ended up getting a Bachelor's of Science in Agricultural Journalism and a Master's of Arts in Counseling. Now I'm combining the two and educating and entertaining about animal behavior and human psychology. So to that lovely panel of old white men who turned me down, I lovingly and kindly have this message. I was not too strong for a girl. I was strong enough as a girl. Gender roles are bull. Did you know that heels and nail polish were originally created for men? Yep. That it took a damn pandemic to finally get McDonald's to stop asking if the Happy Meal was for a girl or a boy, and even a pandemic hasn't stopped this mom from being pissed that it happened for so many years? That flower arranging has traditionally been seen as strictly a man's profession and art form. That it's absolutely ridiculous to think that strength or beauty or emotional intelligence or athleticism belongs to one gender. So, Josh from Dad Challenge Podcast, you're wrong about this. Trans parents do not raise trans kids. Please do a little research before you spout out nonsense. You have a lot going for you. I love your message that kids shouldn't be marketed and exploited on their parents' social media sites. I just wish you'd notice that your ad hominem personal attacks really take away from that really excellent message. You think the only way people will tune into your videos is to be snarky in that very lowest level of humor. You complain that people unsubscribe and attack you for every little thing you say, but making blanket statements you haven't researched does a great deal of damage to real people, real parents with real children. Let's check out a few other statements you've made in that video to see if you're right.
The thing is that if it's naturally occurring in nature, as a lot of people will say it is, then the odds of a person who's transgender having a kid who's transgender are like 1 in a trillion, like one in millions and millions and millions and millions. It's just insane. Okay?
You said that there is a trans craze going on, just like being gay or lesbian 10 and 20 years ago, when more and more people started talking about being homosexual and people stopped hiding in shadows out of real fear. Now transgender people are putting a face to the very real fact that there is a lot more than an XX or XY chromosome to being male or female or man or woman. There is in fact a whole plethora of factors that go into gender, which makes it honestly very antiquated to think that there is a binary gender system in most biological creatures. There are people born with male genetics and appearances that have an XX chromosome pattern. There are folks with XY chromosomes that for the life of them can't get pregnant until they medically find out they can't, despite having most of what they need to carry a child within their very real uteruses. I recommend Forrest Valkai's Sex and Sensibility video here on YouTube. He is an evolutionary biologist and presents this very important topic in an entertaining, easy to understand, and kind way. You should subscribe to him anyway. He is fascinating. And he has the most fabulous hair. After you subscribe and like and watch this video, of course. Josh from the Dad Challenge Podcast also said that the chance of a transgender parent having a transgender child naturally is insane, like 1 in a trillion or millions and millions. In youth between 13 to 18 years of age, by the way, 1.8% of youth identify as transgender. The reported chance is more close to 1 in 500, depending on the culture and area, based on the UCLA School of Law Williams Institute and the Center for Disease Control. This is double than what was previously recorded, and this is most likely due to advances in gender identity data collection over the past 5 years, having provided a more accurate picture of youth in the US who identify as transgender. Previously, we could only estimate that based on adult data. These estimates show us that current policy debates regarding access to gender-affirming care and the ability to participate in team sports likely impact more youth than we previously thought. I'll keep making this point. Transgender youth are truly at risk. This isn't a kid seeking attention or being a pick-me or grifting or seeking negative attention. A according to the Trevor Project, 1 in 3 transgender youth reported attempting suicide. That's about 35% of the trans kids as opposed to 7% cisgender. So almost 1/3 reported being a victim of sex as opposed to 10% of cisgender youth reporting sex, which is about 31% transgender. And more than half reported a 2-week period of depression, one of the criteria making up clinical depressive disorders. Cisgender is about 30%, as opposed to transgender, 53%. That's according to the Trevor Project 2019. These numbers are the best they've got, but don't really actually capture the picture by a long shot. Even though the data collection and research has improved in the past 10 years, we've got a long way to go. This is why it's important to make sure you know what you're talking about when you have a platform and are being listened to by vulnerable people in danger of hating themselves even more because someone they respect is dismissing who they are and what they are experiencing. Your words have impact. For someone who has a genuine heart for children, I think this would encourage you, Josh, to do your due diligence before you assume that a whole population of people are problematic. Then there's point 3 from the Dad Challenge podcast.
Again, I gotta be careful not to point everybody in the direction. I gotta be careful not to label everybody who does this as this, but it's in the conversation. Right? That people who enter into this type of world, become transgender, are autogynephilic or whatever the word term is, where they're addicted to being in women's clothing and it's a kink. It's they can't help it. It's not about just your gender identity. It's about a sexual kink. Okay, and that's in this conversation.
So he just said, I gotta be careful not to label everybody who does this as this, but it's in the conversation. My assertion is that it's not even in the conversation, because it's a whole different umbrella. Your gender and your sexual orientation or attractions are 2 wholly different things. The diagnostic criteria for autogynephilia in the DSM-5 is under transvestic disorder. I'm just reporting here, I don't agree with this. This term, transvestic, really lets you see behind the curtain on this section, as these studies come from the 1980s and 1990s. Studies that, by the way, had no control group or studies regarding transgender men. Solid science needs a control group. Solid science needs to be repeatable, which these studies are not. These studies also aren't refutable, which means there was no real hypothesis in the first place. So as you can tell, these studies, which are still being used to diagnose people in the current statistical manual, are very problematic. So let's look at the DSM-5-TR. The diagnostic criteria are coded under F65.1 and states as follows. Over a period of at least 6 months, recurrent and intense sexual from cross-dressing as manifested by fantasies, urges, or behaviors. B, the fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. When diagnosing, the mental health professional, such as myself, needs to specify if this diagnosis is with autogynephilia, if sexual by thoughts or images of self as a woman. So as this is written, no matter what gender you are, including female, if you are sexually aroused by the thought of yourself as a woman, you fit the diagnosis of transvestic disorder with autogynephilia. How many of you women, cisgender and transgender alike, can raise your hand if asked if you are turned on by the thought of yourself as a woman? I don't think Ray Blanchard thought out that wording. What else did Blanchard not think out? By the way, Ray Blanchard, who was in large part responsible for the paraphilia section of the DSM-5, has stated he believes transgender people can only be males assigned at birth who transitioned into being a woman because they are sexually aroused by it. That's not being transgender at all, nor is it the gender dysphoria that affects a great many transgender people. Gender dysphoria is feeling that who you are is different from what your genitalia says you are, and transgender is altering your circumstances to be recognized as who you feel you truly are. That applies to transgender men as well as women, though his old studies didn't even include one transgender man. Being transgender is not about who you're sexually attracted to at all. Julius Serrano, trans feminist and critic of autophilia, reports that the idea of autophilia being equivalent to transgender is generally disproven within the context of gender transition, as trans women who are on feminizing hormone therapy, especially on anti-androgens, experience a severe drop and in some cases complete loss in libido. Despite this, the vast majority of transgender women continue their transition. Jack Grimm, a transgender advocate and transgender man himself, stated, "My parents are both straight cisgender folk. I'm 100% trans. It's not about the environment you're raised in that creates a trans person." Arguably, assigning arbitrary genders to clothes and items and activities creates an unnecessary dilemma in that not letting your child explore what they like causes mental conflict, and being closed-minded leads to much more fear. You could say that media beauty expectation have an impact on dysphoria, but at the end of the day, it's not me being self-conscious that I don't look like a Victoria's Secrets model. It's that I feel more comfortable and at home in my own skin, presenting as and identifying as a dude. Beautifully said, Grimm. So let's break this down a little more. So autogynephilia is specifically about sexual arousal. It's not about being transgender because your gender is different from who and what you are sexually attracted to. Take a shoe fetishist, for instance. That person who has a shoe fetish is not going to spend their whole day, every day, with their sexy shoes if they're going to get any adulting done at all. They use it as a means of sexual arousal, not as a way of life and who they are. When you live your life in a particular way and function as an adult, it is not a paraphilia, because not every part of your life and every part of who you are is about sex. I really hope they talk to someone else besides Ray Blanchard when they publish the DSM-6, because words like transvestite and autogynephilia have no business being in our mental health reference book for diagnosing and treating people in the 21st century. And we're already 24 years into it. As a mental health professional, I'm downright embarrassed, to be honest. It's also really embarrassing to consider that in December 2003, the Southern Poverty Law Center reported that Ray Blanchard was associated with Steve Sailer's Human Biodiversity Institute, a disarmingly named group of far-right writers, academics, and others associated with pseudoscientific race theories and eugenics. It's confusing that one who has recommended surgery to transgender women would also state that a man without a penis has certain disadvantages in this world, and this, in reality, is what you are creating. Toronto's Clark Institute, now the CAMH, where Ray Blanchard practiced for so many years, has links to eugenics as well. Eugenics emphasizes the importance of restrictive laws that limit the reproductive rights of the so-called defective person, with a history of forced sterilization and even euthanasia. The man largely responsible for the current mental health field's official diagnostic tools view of transvestites and gender dysphoria said in an interview for Vice on April 11th, 2013, how many people who make a joke about, I don't even want to say the word, it rhymes with grannies. I'm sure you can suss that out. So he said, how many people who make a joke about grannies consult the DSM first? This is how he refers to his patients, using a hugely insulting slur. This is the man who came up with the term autogynephilia. That's the term Josh from Dad Challenge Podcast is throwing around in a video, including his views of transgender people. Maybe do your research first. Maybe don't assume that people belong in limited boxes and that when they don't look and act like you, they must be wrong and perverted and less than. Maybe you've been as lucky as I have and heard the argument against transgender because it don't happen in the wild now, does it? It just ain't natural. Let me tell you a little story about the 3 little hens. I got 3 hens at about the age of 5 months. The hens were 5 months old. I was not. So I didn't want any roosters. I just wanted my 3 little egg-laying cuties. They grew and had a great time in my yard eating chicken feed and insects they found, and I kept them safe at night in their nesting den. I noticed something about Natalie. I named them after the Dixie Chicks. That was intriguing. Natalie's comb started getting a lot bigger and redder than Emily and Marty's. If a threat was perceived, Natalie would run after it aggressively until the threat was properly dispatched. One morning, I swore I heard a rooster's crow. Sure enough, Natalie was crowing. I thought, well, maybe they had missexed my hen until all 3 of them began laying eggs. Although Natalie would occasionally lay a double-yolked egg and was less consistent in egg laying than Marty and Emily were. It was fascinating to observe. I was sent an article recently about Betty, the transgender chicken, who experienced something similar. I'm working on a long-form video in my Wild Psychology series all about nature's transgender phenomena. There's a lot of cool examples in science to cover, so like and subscribe so you can be notified of future videos. It would help out a lot. So what's your opinion about what Josh said? Does it surprise you that he thinks this way about transgender people? Does it surprise you that the current diagnostic manual that mental health professionals depend on uses outdated research from the 1980s and 1990s? If you're looking for some good book suggestions, as Josh admirably said he would consider reading, check these out. And thanks, Jack Grimm, again for being a great consultant on this. Please remember, no matter your gender, sexuality, able status, age, race, socioeconomic status, religion, or favorite color, you are worthy of love and have a right to take up space in this world. Remember, be your own safe place.
And don't throw a hissy fit. Every journey is a path, make yourself whole. Breaking free from lies, casting shadows aside, in a world that awaits where you can truly reside. You are the light, your truth shines so bright. Transcend the darkness, let your spirit take flight. Dancing in the colors, bathing in the light. You're fierce and you're fearless, a blooming work of art. Stand tall, be proud, it's your beautiful heart. And through the storms, let the raindrops fall. Each tear's a reminder, beautiful after all. Love painted in spectra, so vibrant and real. Celebrate your heart, let the world see your zeal. Together